And so Mount Vernon here desperately needing a bucket to stay in this game. They trail by 4. And I believe it's going to be, who is it? Elizabeth Fee, I believe, will inbound it for Mount Vernon. Nope, Danny Ellerbrock will inbound it. Ellerbrock inbounds it, gets it over to Gregory. Gregory looking for some help and just had it taken away. Another Mount Vernon turnover. 21 turnovers for the game, and that's going to do it as Coe fouls Huntington. And that is going to do it. And the Foresters are going to pull this one out over Mount Vernon, and Mount Vernon just had another game that was taken away from them. Fryman at the line for Huntington. She has 31 points. And you could not stop her all game long. And her first free throw is good. She has 32. Looking to make it 33 points right here. And Mount Vernon going to fall to 6-8 in the conference. And that free throw no good. And Mount Vernon trails by 5. They desperately need a three-pointer on the other end to stay alive. And Huntington leads 75-70. And it looks like Mount Vernon is going to fall on this one to 6-8, barring a last-second miracle. Huntington will go to 8-6 in conference play. Mount Vernon will once again be strictly the 7 seed with a Grace win over with a huge Grace win over Taylor. And with a Huntington win, Huntington and Grace are going to be tied for the 5 seed. And Mount Vernon is going to be 2 games behind Huntington and Grace going into the game against St. Francis on Wednesday night. And remember, that game is in Fort Wayne. And then, of course, Mount Vernon hosts Taylor next weekend. And I was saying not that long ago that Mount Vernon, I just had a feeling that Mount Vernon was going to lose their remaining games except the one against Bethel on senior night, which will be February 19th. And so far, it looks like it's going to be shaping up to be that. But the good news for Mount Vernon is, with a Taylor loss, Mount Vernon would go to Taylor in the first round of the postseason on Tuesday night, February 25th, as it stands now. And Mount Vernon has proved that they can definitely beat Taylor. And now Mount Vernon will inbound here, and they do. And they had it taken away again. 23 turnovers for the game, and that's going to do it. That is going to do it. And Mount Vernon, this is the most turnovers they have had in a game the whole entire season. Most turnovers they've had the whole entire season, and they are going to drop this one. And Fryman will go back to the line for Huntington. She has 32 points and missed the first, no good. And, boy, your heart just really aches and hurts for the Lady Cougars as this was a game that they were looking so good in the first half. And that free throw by Fryman is good. And she now has 33. And now Mount Vernon looking for a shot at the buzzer. No good. No good by Coe, and that will do it. Huntington comes back in the second half and defeats Mount Vernon by a score of 76-70. Huntington beats Mount Vernon both times this year. Mount Vernon falls to 16-10 overall. They now have lost 2 straight games, and more than likely that loss is going to hurt Mount Vernon's chances in getting potentially a bid at the national tournament coming up the middle part of March. And Mount Vernon goes to 6-8 in the Crossroads League. Huntington improves on their season. Huntington will go to 19-7 overall. They go to 8-6 in the Crossroads League. Huntington now has won 4 in a row. And Mount Vernon now falls to 6-13 in the all-time series versus Huntington. Huntington improves to 13-6 all-time versus Mount Vernon. Just some quick closing stats here. Sarah Fryman, she was just unstoppable for Huntington today. 33 points by the senior, and that was something that Coach Short had said in the pregame that they needed to guard Sarah Fryman, and they had a plan to put Danny Ellerbrock up against Fryman, but Fryman was able to just respond very, very well and win the game for Huntington. And don't forget that really more than that, Several of Sarah Fryman's points were based off of Mount Vernon turnovers. As we said, Mount Vernon on the day, 23 turnovers, and they just could not excuse me, they just could not capitalize off of the turnovers. 23 turnovers on the day for Mount Vernon. So just some final stats. Taylor Gregory coming away with 15 points on the day, and as well as 13 rebounds. So she once again records a double-double. Maggie Coe on the afternoon comes away with 9 points on the day. Danny Ellerbrock coming away also with 9 points on the day. Elizabeth Fee, 2 points. Riley Peru coming away with 5 points off of the bench for the Lady Cougars. Maggie Koblenz coming away with 2 points. But all of the offensive scoring was Sage Brannon. And, boy, Brannon had quite a day behind the line. I mean, you just add these numbers up, and it's pretty impressive. I mean, the way that girl played all game long, as we said, the sophomore from Cardington, Ohio, coming away with, 27 points by Brannon on the day, by my calculations. Yep, that's what I thought. So, Sage Brannon, I believe that is an all-time career high. So, we definitely want to congratulate Sage Brannon on, we're pretty sure, a brand new career high of 27 points on the day. And really, without Sage Brannon, Mount Vernon would have lost this game by 25 or 30 in reality. But boy, Ed, as I was talking about just a few minutes ago while you were outside, the turnovers just hurt Mount Vernon all game long, just like the first meeting between these two teams. Now, the first time these two teams met, Mount Vernon had 20 turnovers. Today, they had, I believe, a total of 23 turnovers, and that just really hurt them all game long. And
should have been 24.
24 turnovers. So yeah, Mount Vernon had.
You can't win turning the ball over that
No,
much.
and boy, and
the only reason that the game wasn't further is Huntington only shot like 20%.
Yeah, so in reality, Mount Vernon definitely shot the ball a lot better than Huntington did as well. And but boy, the turnovers just flat out hurt Mount Vernon pretty much all game long. And of course,
to win when you turn it over that much.
Yep, absolutely. And of course, Grace victorious today, defeating Bethel 84-75. And Jessica Irwin coming away with 23 points. Brickner with 14 points. And the Lancers able to win that game. So Grace is tied with Huntington now at 8-6 in conference play. They are tied for the 5 seed. Mount Vernon is strictly the 7 seed, 6 and 8 in conference play. Also, some other scoring updates and another upset alert. St. Francis is going to defeat Taylor on the day. St. Francis up by 11 with 1:07 to go in the game. So with the St. Francis win, they are going to go to 11-3 in conference play, and now you're going to have a 3-way tie barring the Marion game for first place in the Crossroads League. So St. Francis, definitely a huge win for that program this afternoon.
Marion
won. And of course,
53-51.
Yeah, so Marion victorious today, so we definitely want to congratulate them for a job very well done on the day this afternoon. And of course, Indiana Wesleyan is going to defeat Goshen, and they did 75-42 on the day. Trexler with 11 points and Seacrest with 10 points. And now let's listen in to the post-game interview by head coach Amanda Short.
I want to look at the film, sort of exhale from this game. What are some things you want to think about going into next week on the road?
St. Francis is a very good basketball team. We were right there with them here at home, but we just have to play 4 quarters of really good defense, and we had a lot of scoring droughts in today's game, partly because we didn't take care of the basketball, and St. Francis is a very good defensive team, so if we don't take care of the basketball, it won't be a basketball game. If we do, we'll put ourselves in a good position.
Sometimes the game's simple, isn't it?
I told my girls that 100 times, so if you want to go in there and tell them, that'd be great.
Coach, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Coach Amanda Short with us on the postgame show. Tough one for Mount Vernon today. They led by double
Joe
digits.
said sometimes it's the simple things, right? She goes, well, I told him that, but if you'd like to go in there and tell him.
Well, there you have it, folks. And Coach Short definitely really said it really, really well that that hey, if you want to tell my girls that to try and get better, all power to you. So Coach Short is definitely, as you could tell in that post game interview, Coach Short obviously not happy at all with the way that her team has played in terms of the outcome of today's game as well. So we can tell you that with Spring Arbor's loss today, that allows Mount Vernon to officially have clinched a playoff spot. So despite the outcome of today's game, we want to congratulate our Lady Cougars for officially clinching no worse than the 7 seed for the second year in a row in the playoffs. As Huntington and Grace go to 8 and 6. So Huntington and Grace are tied for the 5 and the 6 seed. Mount Vernon trails Grace and Huntington by 2 games. And Marion, with their win today, goes to the 1 seed, surprisingly, at 12 and 2. Taylor, with their loss to St. Francis, will fall to 11 and 3. And Taylor and St. Francis are going to be tied for the 2 seed. Now, with that said, St. Francis would hold the tiebreaker as they will split the series this year. So that means that not just will Marion be the 1 seed, but St. Francis will climb all the way up to the 2 seed, and Taylor will fall down to the 3 seed. Indiana Wesleyan will remain the 4 seed at 10 and 4. They still hold a 2-game lead over Huntington and Grace for the 4 seed. So as it stands now, Mount Vernon would go to Taylor in the opening round of the postseason Tuesday night, February 25th. Grace, as it stands now, would travel to St. Francis, Mount Vernon would travel to Taylor. Taylor would be the 3 seed. Grace would, I believe that's right. If I say, because Mount Vernon should be the 7, but I stand corrected. Mount Vernon would travel, as it stands now, to St. Francis in the opening round of the postseason, as St. Francis will be the 2 seed.
No, they go to they're the 7.
Yep.
Yeah, they go to the 2.
Yep. So as it stands now, Mount Vernon would have again quite a battle on Tuesday night, February 25th, going to Fort Wayne to take on St. Francis, as St. Francis will climb to the 2 seed as they will split the series with Taylor. Grace would travel to Taylor in the opening round. Huntington would go to Indiana Wesleyan, and Spring Arbor would go to Marion. So those are your updated look at the standings. And, of course, don't forget the men's game coming up in a little bit. Joe and Colin will be with you on the call of that game as well. And so thank you for tuning in to today's game. Unfortunately, things just did not go Mount Vernon's way. I mean, they had a great, they came out so strong in the third quarter. They built a 10-point lead, and ever since then, Huntington outscored them 32 to 17. Ever since in the second half, being outscored 32 to 17. So there you go. There's your problem as well. So other games that have just gone official, of course, St. Francis upsetting Taylor today, 78 to 64. And I just alluded to St. Francis would jump to the 2 seed as they have split the series with Taylor this year. So unfortunately, that will not go Mount Vernon's way, as right now they would travel to St. Francis in the opening round of the postseason. So the games coming up on Wednesday night are going to be even more crucial than today. And of course, Mount Vernon, as we said, losing this one 76 to 70, and with a 10-loss season, unfortunately, that will not allow them to have a shot at an at-large bid for the national tournament.
It's still possible.
And ever since the win against Goshen on January 4th, where Mount Vernon was 13 and 3, they have gone 3 and 7 since that win against Goshen back on January 4th in Goshen. So obviously the tide has swung in terms of Mount Vernon's schedule, and it does not get any easier as they go to St. Francis on Wednesday night. And, of course, St. Francis upsetting Taylor today. So that's going to be another crucial game. And as we said, Marion defeated Spring Arbor 83-51. So Spring Arbor goes to 2-12 now in conference play. And Marion goes to 12-2. And, of course, the Grace game, not official, but Indiana Wesleyan with their win, they go to 10-4. Now Indiana Wesleyan only trails St. Francis and Taylor by 1 game. So there's a chance for Indiana Wesleyan to make a run and perhaps help Mount Vernon out in the last stretch of the schedule. And, of course, Grace today, we said they defeated Bethel. They go to Spring Arbor on Wednesday night. Then they go to St. Francis, and then they go to IWU. So things definitely could I suppose work out for Mount Vernon, but they desperately need some help. So in the updated look at the standings, you will have Marion be the 1 seed now at 12-2. St. Francis jumping to the 2 seed with splitting the series against Taylor. Taylor falling to the 3 seed. Indiana Wesleyan 1 game behind both St. Francis and Taylor at 10-4. And Indiana Wesleyan still holds a 2-game lead over Huntington and Grace for the 4 seed. Mount Vernon, unfortunately, falls in this game at 6-8, and Mount Vernon will be the 7 seed. And as we said, with the Mount Vernon's loss today, there are 4 games left, and they are still up 4 over Spring Arbor. But of course, Spring Arbor more than likely will lose again on Wednesday night. So, like I said, I don't see Spring Arbor winning out the rest of this season, but still, Mount Vernon, we can pretty much say, has officially clinched no worse than the 7 seed, so congratulations to them. But Ed, real quick, some final thoughts regarding the updated playoff standings. I mean, what are you looking for in the remaining 4 games, and if you're Mount Vernon, what do you think needs to happen in terms of not just winning some more games, but
they can pick up some spots with some other teams playing each other. There's still some teams have to play each other, which is going to help them out. They're not out of it. They gotta clean up a few things, though. You gotta stop turning the ball over so much.
Yep.
Like I said, they're not out of it. They can still pick up some spots, and they just gotta play 1 game at a time.
Right. But as we were alluding to in the pregame, we talked about St. Francis and how St. Francis, with their remaining schedule, we could see them losing 3 out of the last 4 games, and that would definitely help Mount Vernon if Mount Vernon could also get some help with Huntington and Grace losing their remaining games, which, I mean, in Huntington's schedule, they don't have an easy schedule either. I mean, they play some pretty tough teams moving forward, so Mount Vernon could conceivably get some help with Huntington losing. And then, of course, if I could definitely see Mount Vernon being in contention for at least the 6th seed. I don't know if they're going to get any higher than that coming off of the really tough loss today, but still, I mean, they're, like you said, they're not out of it. I mean, Mount Vernon has just got to buckle down on defense, and as we said today, they played great defense, in 2 out of the 4 quarters, and then the other 2 quarters they played absolutely horrible defense and turned the ball over 23 times, and you just cannot win any basketball game with that many turnovers, despite, even if you're Marion or Taylor. So, as we said, Mount Vernon's hanging in there, and I mean, they could get some help with Huntington, but most of all, I mean, you look at St. Francis's home record, they're 8-1. With the huge upset today over Taylor, St. Francis has only lost 1 game at home, so the odds are definitely not in Mount Vernon's favor in terms of that. I mean, Mount Vernon now falls to 8-4 at home. They started out undefeated. They started out 6-0 at home. And as I alluded to earlier, ever since that win against Goshen on January 4th, where they were 13-3 overall, they've gone 3-7 since. And that's just not what you want to have happen, especially at this point in the season, because now with St. Francis splitting the series over Taylor, St. Francis would jump to the 2 seed, and Mount Vernon would travel to Fort Wayne in the first round and more than likely lose that game unless, barring by some miracle. So, again, things are, I guess you have to stay optimistic. You have to stay positive. I mean, that game next Saturday against Taylor, though, that really is a must-win game, and especially with the way Taylor has been playing lately, they've started to slack a little bit. So, Mount Vernon, they could pull off the big upset over Taylor next Saturday, but the key to that game is going to be do not turn the ball over 23 times against Taylor.
You're not going to win very many games turning the ball over 23, 24.
And I mean, think about the game against Marion. Mount Vernon, I think, only had like 10 turnovers the whole entire game, but they missed a lot of their shots. Today, they were able to make the shots, but then a turnover. Yep. So,
they can get a full game going, they'll be good to go.
Yeah. So, well, that's going to do it for us. So thanks so much for tuning into this game. Once again, a final score, Huntington 76, Mount Vernon 70. Mount Vernon falling to 6-8 in conference play, 16-10 overall. And they trail Huntington and Grace by 2 games for the 5 seed, so they're not out of it. But really, for Mount Vernon, you have to win the next 2 games and hope that Huntington loses the next 2. And then things are going to be a little bit more interesting. But things are really interesting on the top with Taylor and St. Francis. And, of course, Indiana Wesleyan making a serious bid, too. So things are not over yet. We're just going to take it game by game. Don't forget, Mount Vernon goes to St. Francis on Tuesday and Wednesday night. And I will be with you on the call of that game in my apartment on the campus of MVNU. You can catch me on the pregame show beginning at 6:45 that day. So I hope that you will tune in with me, and we'll hope that the Lady Cougars can finally get back in the win column and win that game on Wednesday night. As we said, they only lost by 7 the first time. Coach Short alluded to that in the postgame and said that they hung with St. Francis the first time. They have to do that on Wednesday night, and most importantly, not turn the ball over 23 times. So things are definitely looking positive. Don't forget the men's game coming up here in just a few minutes. You can catch Joe and Colin with you on the call of that game. For Ed Harden, for Sharon Harden, I'm Matt Harden. Thanks so much for tuning in with me this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.